If you grew up with complex trauma, you carry shame. And the deeper the trauma runs, the deeper that shame goes. Do you ever feel like you have to earn the right just to be here? Like existing on its own isn't enough? Have you ever caught yourself thinking that if people really saw what was underneath, they'd walk away? And no matter how much you fix or improve about yourself, does something underneath still feel off or broken? Well, by the end of this video, you're going to know what shame actually is, where that voice telling you you're not good enough came from, and the real difference between shame and guilt, because that distinction changes everything about how you move forward. I spent years building a version of myself I thought people could accept, while underneath I was convinced the real me wasn't good enough to show to anyone. I didn't have a name for any of this at the time. I just knew there was a version of me I kept hidden, and I was scared of what would happen if anyone saw it. May Allah reward you for being curious. Let's tie our camel. Here's the first thing almost nobody tells you about shame. It's a belief about who you are, sitting underneath everything you feel. It sounds like this: I'm not valuable. I'm not lovable. I'm not good enough. I'm less than everyone else around me. For years, I carried some version of that belief without ever putting words to it. I just knew there was a weight that never fully lifted, no matter what was going right in my life. And that belief shows up everywhere. It's pain that doesn't seem to have a clear source, or a fear that something good is going to get taken away from you, or this constant insecurity in your closest relationships. Sometimes it's anger or jealousy towards people who seem to have life figured out. And underneath all of it, a quiet hopelessness that nothing's really going to change. And when you're carrying that much weight, you start looking for anything that makes it stop, even for just a minute. For some of us, it's scrolling. For some, it's pornography. Maybe it's sugar or spending or, something that we don't talk about out loud. It doesn't really matter what the thing is. The shame is pushing you towards it, whether you realize it or not. Shame compounds. It builds on itself and pulls more of the same kind of pain towards you. Picture a kid showing up at the masjid with a bad haircut, that his mother gave him. Someone notices and gives him a nickname for it. And now every single day, he's getting reminded of the thing he already felt bad about. So here's how your mind tries to deal with all of this. We could draw this as 4 circles. The first in the middle is your real self, who you actually are underneath everything. The second is the shame-based self, or what people would call the inner critic. It formed early when the people raising you reflected back that your real self wasn't good enough. And now it runs in the background, telling you the same thing. The third is the persona, or the mask, the version of you that performs and acts a certain way so that people like you or accept you. I think for us as Muslim men, we spend a long time inside that one. And for the fourth is the ideal self, the version of you that, if you could just become it, usually perfect, everything would finally be okay. And here's the thing, and this is very important. Your ideal critic measures your real self against that ideal self, and that ideal self was never real to begin with. And that's the trap. The gap never closes because the ideal self is some perfect, unrealistic version of yourself. And so it keeps feeding the same shame it started with, while convincing you the whole time that you're making progress. SubhanAllah. Brother, if you can relate to this, join us in the Mind Sentry Labs community for Muslim brothers. No pressure, no need to explain yourself, just brothers resolving this stuff together, inshallah. Links in the description. So where does this inner critic actually come from? When you're a kid, your parents or caretakers delivered messages, on purpose or not, about which parts of you were acceptable and which weren't. Over time, you stopped needing them to say it out loud. That voice became yours, and now your own mind runs the program. And here's where it gets personal. If you got the message that being sensitive was a problem, or being angry was a problem, or needing too much was a problem, you didn't just hide those parts. You started hating them. You shut them out. You hide them and act like they're not there. But they stay. They're still you, just buried, and every time they surface, the shame gets louder. The next time you notice that voice, try something. Don't argue with it. Just notice where it lands in your body. For a lot of brothers, it's a tightness in the chest, tightness in the jaw, or a drop in the stomach, or this heavy feeling behind the eyes. That sensation is information, and it's old. It's not actually about what's happening right now. Now here's the distinction that changes everything. Guilt and shame are not the same thing, even though they feel almost identical in the moment. Guilt points at your action. It says, that thing You did wasn't aligned with who you want to be, and it gives you a way to correct it. But shame points at your identity. The message underneath it is that you're not good enough. Full stop. And there's nothing to do about it. If you grew up in a house where normal needs got treated like selfishness, wanting attention or wanting time or just wanting to be a kid, you ended up with something extra. False guilt. Guilt for things that were never wrong in the first place. Here's how the loop works. A shame-based person does something they regret, and then they feel guilty, like anyone would. But then shame jumps in and turns it into proof. Saying stuff to yourself like, see, that's exactly the kind of person I am. And now the guilt stops correcting behavior and ends up feeding the shame instead. So if shame is something you learned, here's the part that matters. It can be unlearned. The next time the voice tells you you're not good enough, try naming it for what it is. An old message that got planted a long time ago. Not the truth. You can even ask, is this true? Am I really weak? Notice where it sits in your body and let it be there without fighting it. That feeling is just an old wound making noise. And for me, this lines up with something I find pretty grounding. In Islam, every person is born in a state of fitra, a natural state of goodness, before anything else ever gets written on top of it. Which means whatever you actually are, underneath all that noise, was never the problem to begin with. We know that every child is born a Muslim, and that it's the parents that raise them into another religion or without religion. The same goes for their identity and who they are as a person. But here's the thing. Once you start separating yourself from that voice, the guilt doesn't disappear. It actually shows back up, sometimes louder than before, especially once you start changing how you treat yourself and the people around you start reacting to it. What that shift actually looks like and why the guilt comes back at exactly that point, I broke that down in this video. As-salamu alaykum.